Hey everyone, my name is Mari, and today I'll be talking about SignalBoost, which is a project about how to not give out your phone number, but to still make friends. Cool, and then next slide. So first, I want to take us back to the summer of 2020. Many of you probably heard about this, but basically it was the biggest uprising and civil rights movement in modern history. And I just wanted to pose a question to the audience. Have any of y'all participated, or in the past year, did any of y'all go to any events affiliated with Black Lives Matter? Just a show of hands. I see a few. Cool. Awesome. So I went to some of these events and protests, basically where millions of people all over the country took to the streets and participated in a lot of actions in order to protest systemic racism and police violence. So during this movement, as technologists, but also activists, my friends who are now my team, we're really interested in figuring out what tools are people using to organize, particularly what kind of tech tools are people using. Next slide. And what we saw, and which many of you may be aware of, is that a lot of people were organizing over social media. So things like posting events on places like Instagram or Twitter, sharing stories of, friends and colleagues at these protests, and also live streaming. Next slide. But we also saw some of the limitations about using social media for activism. Some of our colleagues and friends who were posting on social media had their pages taken down, or the posts taken down, or even their accounts banned. And so what we learned from this is that while Instagram and Twitter were good for sharing with friends and kind of posting about events, they were really not good for real-time coordination and logistics around organizing. Next slide. Another trend that we saw was the proliferation of Signal, which we now have seen as one of the most popular messaging apps for people who are concerned about their digital privacy and security. Next slide. So now I want to tell you the story of Bianca. Bianca is a somewhat fictional, but based in reality, community organizer based here in New York. And during this past summer, she heard that there was an occupation going on at New York City Hall, and she wanted to organize a march from Brooklyn to this occupation and on the Brooklyn Bridge to hold a moment of silence to bring attention to the death of George Floyd and for racial justice. So basically, in collaboration with 10 to 20 leaders from other community-based groups, Bianca wanted to do this really awesome activity and to coordinate it in a way where she could react to the fluctuating needs and safety concerns and logistics of the moment. Next slide. So Bianca wanted a way essentially to communicate to lots of people directly in real time without exposing her phone number to a bunch of strangers. She also wanted to avoid the politics and the chaos of a Signal group chat, essentially, which she'd been involved with, but had, quickly seen spiral out of control and where it was really hard to get essential information in the moment. Bianca's also really invested in locking down her digital security because, next slide. Last week, she had a friend that got arrested at a protest, and that friend was a fellow organizer, and that arrest potentially, because this friend had lost control of their device for a moment or for a few hours, had potentially exposed dozens of group chats with other organizers to law enforcement. So after talking to dozens of these types of organizers, we saw that they had a lot of similar needs and especially anxieties around their digital security when it comes to organizing. And that's why we decided to build a tool called SignalBoost. Next slide. So what SignalBoost does is it takes the chaotic and potentially dangerous dynamics of a group chat where everyone's phone number is on everyone else's phone, and it streamlines them. Next slide. So what SignalBoost does is it enables secure and direct comms with a mass audience without exposing an identity or personal phone number. So what that means in practice is someone like Bianca could use SignalBoost and control a phone number in order to send out broadcasts to masses of people from, tens to hundreds in real time. And those people would receive Bianca's broadcast from a SignalBoost channel phone number instead of from Bianca's personal phone number. Next slide. In practice, this is an example of how SignalBoost was used in the wild. The occupation at City Hall actually took their SignalBoost phone number and projected it onto the building and sent out kind of some real-time updates about what was going on day by day. And people, from anywhere from here in New York, locally to around the world, were able to subscribe to those updates and get an idea of what was happening on the ground. Next slide. So since then, SignalBoost has been used a lot in the US, but also growing in a growing way around the world. Next slide. It's been used, like I mentioned earlier, to broadcast and coordinate mass mobilizations around racial justice. Next. To dispatch medics and legal observers to those kind of protests. Next. And by a large NGO to, keep track of a democratic election and reports of election fraud in Tanzania. Next. And as well, more recently, to mobilize activists fighting against internet censorship and internet shutdowns in an autocratic regime in Burma. Next slide. So you might be asking, Mari, what does all this activism and all these people doing all these cool things have to do with data futures? Next slide. So essentially what we did was we did something a little bit clever. We took something kind of complicated and potentially dangerous where everyone's phone number was exposed on everyone else's device. Next slide. And like I mentioned, we streamlined it. We streamlined it so that all of the broadcasts are routed through a single channel phone number instead of everyone else's phone number. But to run a service like this, it's not, that doesn't happen just magically. If you work on any sort of tech project, that's not just magic. It means that we had to keep track of admins and subscribers for each what we call SignalBoost channel. And while something like an admin and subscriber list for any other sort of social media like Instagram or Twitter might be kind of commonly held types of data, we haven't taken this lightly because the users of our service, of SignalBoost, tend to be people like activists, human rights defenders, journalists, or other people that are particularly vulnerable to surveillance. So we take the protection of this data, the data that we need to run our tool, really seriously, and we want to be good stewards of it. Next slide. So as part of the Data Futures Lab, we're really excited about these kind of two strategies that we have to be good stewards of the data that we use for SignalBoost. The first is a data trust, and I'm sure you all heard Anouk talk about this in the plenary earlier. She did a really good job of introing it. But in the context of SignalBoost, a data trust is essentially a way that we're exploring to set up an entity that has a legally binding responsibility of care and protection towards its users. And this could be cool because if, SignalBoost as a service is subpoenaed, the data trust could offer a really interesting and exciting novel legal defense for the protection of that data. The second approach is called encryption at rest. And essentially what this means is that we're exploring a solution where the data, aka the list of subscribers and admins to a channel, this list of phone numbers, could be encrypted to a password that users have and that we, as operators of the SignalBoost service, don't have. This means that we would allow people to broadcast out messages, but they would be able to broadcast out messages without us knowing who they're broadcasting to. So we're really excited. We've already begun exploring some of these approaches at the Data Futures Lab, and we're excited to continue doing that work in community with you all. Next slide. So we'd love to collaborate. If if you want to collaborate with us, we'd love to be friends. If you have any feedback or ideas that could intersect with the approaches that I just mentioned, we'd love to hear from you. You can get in contact with us. All of our information, more info about our project is online at signalboost.info. And you can also message us on Signal if you'd like, anonymously, by sending hello or just sending any message to the phone number above. So with that, I'd love to thank the people who have funded us up to this point, Mozilla, of course, Calix Institute, Emerson Collective, and our fiscal sponsor, Aspiration Tech.